Welcome back to the channel. Today we've got a massive shakeup in the WNBA to break down, and this one is coming straight from one of the league's biggest stars, Napheesa Collier of the Minnesota Lynx. Less than 2 days after her team was knocked out of the playoffs by the Phoenix Mercury, Collier stepped up to a microphone in Minneapolis, pulled out a prepared 2-page statement, and basically lit the league office on fire. We're talking about direct shots at Commissioner Cathy Engelbert, harsh criticism of WNBA officiating, and serious accusations that league leadership is more interested in control and power than actually growing the game. And she didn't sugarcoat anything. Collier, who's not just a star forward, but also the vice president of the Women's National Basketball Players Association, went as far as to say that WNBA has the worst leadership in the world. That's not frustration in the heat of the moment. That's a calculated public call-out of the people running the league. So let's walk through exactly what happened, what Collier said, how Cathy Engelbert responded, and what this could mean for the future of the WNBA, especially with a new CBA and that giant media rights deal on the horizon. To really understand why this exploded the way it did, we need to go back to Game 3 of the semifinals between the Minnesota Lynx and the Phoenix Mercury. Late in the game, in the final 30 seconds, the Lynx were still fighting to extend their season when Collier got the ball. As she went to work, Phoenix's Alyssa Thomas came in, stripped the ball, and in the chaos of that play, Collier went down hard. No whistle, no foul. Collier stayed down, clearly hurt. That was the moment everything snapped for Minnesota head coach Cheryl Reeve. Furious about the no call, Reeve bolted onto the court, yelling at the officials. She had to be physically held back and was eventually tossed from the game with 21.8 seconds left. Afterward, at the post-game news conference, Reeve unloaded on the officiating with a profanity-filled rant and called for major changes at the league level. The WNBA responded quickly, a $15,000 fine and a suspension for Game 4. She had to watch her team's elimination from the playoffs from the sidelines. And Reeve wasn't the only one punished. Las Vegas Aces coach Becky Hammon and Indiana Fever coach Stephanie White were also fined later on for publicly backing Reeve and criticizing the referees. So already, officiating was a huge topic across the WNBA. Coaches were complaining, the league office was responding with fines, and fans everywhere were debating whether ref inconsistency was ruining games. Now add this. Collier's injury in that same sequence wasn't just a minor sprain. On Tuesday, she explained that what happened at the end of Game 3 was almost the exact same injury she suffered back in August when she missed over 3 weeks with a right ankle issue. She said she has a couple of torn ligaments and torn shin muscles, though thankfully no broken bones. That's not just a bruise from a tough playoff game. That's an injury that can affect a career. And that's the backdrop for her press conference in Minneapolis. Minnesota just lost Game 4 without her. They're out of the postseason, and now she's speaking not just as a frustrated player, but as a union leader who's had enough. Collier started by making it clear this wasn't some emotional reaction to one game or one call. She said she'd been trying to handle these issues behind closed doors for a long time. According to her, she's had conversations with league leadership, tried to raise concerns privately, and waited for changes that never came. Her message was that the problems with WNBA officiating and the way players are treated in general have reached a point where silence is no longer an option. She hammered the league for what she sees as a total lack of accountability. Refereeing, in her view, is inconsistent to the point where it plagues the game and undermines its integrity. She said year after year, the one thing that has stayed the same in the WNBA is the absence of real responsibility from those at the top. What really stood out was the way she described the league's current culture. Collier accused leadership of being less interested in innovation and collaboration and more focused on control and power. She said the way the WNBA deals with dissent, and we're seeing it with the recent fines on Reeve, Hammon, and White, is simply by trying to shut people up. In her words, the league's idea of accountability is silencing voices through fines. She told reporters she isn't worried about being fined herself. What she's worried about is the future of the sport. And remember, this isn't just any player. This is a 2025 WNBA MVP runner-up, a face of the Minnesota Lynx, and a key figure in the WNBA. When someone in her position publicly says the league has the worst leadership in the world, it's not just a shot, it's a declaration of open conflict with the commissioner's office. So how did Cathy Engelbert respond? Not long after Collier's comments, Engelbert issued a statement through a WNBA spokesperson. She kept it professional and respectful, saying she has the utmost respect for Napheesa Collier and all WNBA players, and highlighted how hard everyone has worked to transform the league. She said her focus remains on ensuring a bright future for the league, working together to elevate the game, and she emphasized that her commitment to the players isn't going anywhere, even when their perspectives differ. But she also said she was disheartened by the way Collier described their conversations and league leadership. So Engelbert pushed back gently, without escalating the tone, but she clearly wasn't okay with how Collier framed things. And that brings us to one of the most explosive parts of all of this: Collier's account of a private conversation she says she had with Engelbert last winter.
This happened at Unrivaled, the 3x3 professional winter league that Collier co-founded with her husband, Alex Pizzell. During that event, she says she asked Engelbert a very straightforward question. If players like Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, and Paige Buchers are bringing huge attention and major revenue potential into women's basketball, why are they being paid so little by comparison? For example, Caitlin Clark's WNBA salary this season was just $78,066. We all know her impact: record-breaking TV ratings, sold-out arenas, massive jersey sales, social media engagement. She's arguably the biggest name in the women's game right now, and yet her league salary is a fraction of her off-court earnings. According to Collier, Engelbert responded by saying, "Caitlin should be grateful she makes $16 million off the court, because without the platform that the WNBA gives her, she wouldn't make anything." Collier also said that in that same conversation, Engelbert told her that players should be on their knees thanking their lucky stars for the media rights deal that I got them. That's referring to the new 11-year, $2.2 billion media rights agreement that will kick in next season, a huge deal that will reshape the financial landscape of the league. Caitlin Clark, for her part, declined to comment through the Indiana Fever. So we only have Collier's version of that conversation and Engelbert's broader written response. But if what Collier is saying is accurate, those lines about being grateful and being on their knees are exactly the kind of thing that will set off a powder keg between players and the commissioner. It feeds directly into the feeling that, from the players' perspective, the league still doesn't truly value them in proportion to the money and attention they're generating. And that's where the collective bargaining agreement comes in. The current WNBA CBA expires on October 31st. Right now, the maximum salary for a WNBA player is around $250,000. The players, through the WNBPA, are pushing for significant raises, and importantly, a real revenue-sharing system that isn't built around a fixed, limited structure. They want a model that moves more in line with other professional leagues, whereas the pie grows, the player share grows with it. Engelbert has publicly said she wants this next deal to be transformational. She's talked about significantly increasing player salaries and benefits, but she's also balancing that with pressure from ownership, people who want a path to profitability and are cautious about how fast expenses grow. From the players' side, though, Collier made it clear on Tuesday that they don't feel valued the way they should be. She said it's time for people to understand how the league is actually operating, and how, from their point of view, WNBA players are not being treated in line with the level of product they're putting out. And she tied that directly back to officiating. Collier said her frustration about the refs is not just based on that Game 3 no call or the Lynx being eliminated. She said the result of Sunday's game didn't change her opinion on referees one way or the other. In her mind, this issue has been building for years. She said officiating inconsistency has reached a point where it's actively hurting the sport and damaging the league's integrity. Fans see questionable calls or missed calls every night. Coaches bring up officiating win or lose. Players feel like the refs are losing control of games. And instead of addressing it transparently, in her view, the league just hands out fines and moves on. She didn't stop there. Collier brought up a recent ESPN report that cited WNBA data showing no correlation between missed calls by officials and the rash of playoff injuries we've seen. She called that claim an insult to her intelligence. For her, saying there's no connection between rough, uncontrolled play and injuries doesn't pass the eye test. She argued that what's truly unsustainable isn't players speaking out. It's trying to maintain a quality product on the court while allowing officials to lose control of the action. To her, everyone inside the game has been flagging these issues, and leadership is simply looking the other way. She used a word that cuts deep: negligence. And then there's one more quote she attributed to Engelbert that's already making headlines. Collier says she asked Engelbert what the league planned to do specifically about officiating. According to Collier, the commissioner replied, "Only the losers complain about the refs." If that's accurate, you can see why players and coaches, many of whom have been fined for doing exactly that, would feel like their concerns are being dismissed rather than seriously addressed. Cheryl Reeve, who was fined and suspended for her own outburst about officiating, said she supports Collier speaking out, though she admitted she hadn't fully seen or read everything Collier said yet. Reeve knows Collier's voice carries a lot of weight, and she backed her importance in this moment. So where does this leave the WNBA? On one side, you have Napheesa Collier and other players who are saying enough is enough. They want better officiating, real accountability from leadership, and compensation that reflects the money players like Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, and Paige Buchers are bringing into the ecosystem. They feel like fines and deflection are being used to suppress real criticism. On the other side, you have Cathy Engelbert and the league pointing to a massive new media rights deal, an expanding global footprint, rising franchise valuations, and their plans to grow salaries and benefits in a sustainable way. Engelbert insists she respects the players and is committed to working with them, but she clearly disputes Collier's characterization of how those internal conversations have gone. The tension between those two sides is now very public. With the CBA set to expire and negotiations already underway, this is not some small disagreement. This is about who holds the power, how the league is run, how players are treated, and what kind of future the WNBA is actually building. For fans of women's basketball, this moment is huge. You've got one of the game's top players calling WNBA leadership the worst in the world, detailing private remarks that many see as dismissive and disrespectful, and labeling the league's response to long-standing complaints as negligent. You've got coaches like Cheryl Reeve, Becky Hammon, and Stephanie White willing to risk fines to defend their players and call out officiating. You've got data being used to say one thing, and players saying that data doesn't reflect what they're living through on the court. And then hanging over it all, an 11-year, $2.2 billion media rights deal and a CBA that will define how much of that money actually finds its way into players' pockets. Collier ended her remarks by making it clear she wasn't doing this lightly. From her perspective, the league had years to fix these issues quietly, and they haven't. In her view, the leadership is more focused on maintaining control and shutting down criticism than on listening to the people actually putting their bodies on the line every night. So now, everything is out in the open. Let me know what you think. Do you side more with Napheesa Collier and the players who are speaking out, or with Cathy Engelbert's approach of gradual, sustainable growth? Do you think officiating is really as big a problem as players and coaches say? And with this CBA deadline coming up, what kind of changes do you believe the WNBA needs for its athletes? Drop your thoughts in the comments, especially if you've been following the WNBA closely this season. This is one of the most important turning points the league has seen in years, and it's not going away anytime soon.